What's going on, Packers Nation? Welcome back to another video of Packers Latest. I'm your host, Taylor Bretl, keeping you up to date on the latest news on the green and gold Green Bay Packers. A happy Thursday to all of you watching out there. A Merry Christmas, a happy holiday. Let's get into the spirit real quick and let's throw on the hat. It's not green, it's not gold, but it's in spirit. Let's put, this is only going to last this episode, but you know what? For the fun of it, it is Christmas. I appreciate you tuning in if you are watching this on Christmas Day to always stay up to date on the latest news on the green and gold. We got a pretty busy show ahead of us today. With it being Thursday, there are 3 NFL games today. None of those the Green Bay Packers, something the Packers could root for, and hoping that the Minnesota Vikings team take down the Detroit Lions for the Packers' playoff chances. They could clinch today, but nonetheless, lots to look forward to for Green Bay with their game against the Baltimore Ravens on Saturday. We're going to start this one off talking about Jordan Love. He is back at practice despite that concussion protocol he was in, taking the hit to the head in the second quarter against the Chicago Bears. And this is big for the Packers because when we get into this Wednesday injury report, you're going to see why Jordan Love being practicing, I should say, not being active, not being active for the game Saturday, too early to tell there, but practicing is some very, very good news for not just Jordan Love, but for this Green Bay Packers quarterback room. Love against Chicago played pretty solid, couldn't really get it done in the end zone, but again, got taken out early in the second quarter. But he has put together a very strong season, as we know, for the Packers. We look at this a little bit more. This is per Rob Domofsky on X. It was media availability with Christian Watson, so you kind of get some players talking about Jordan Love and what they're seeing. Watson saying he's looked really good from everything that I've talked to him about. He feels like he's in a good spot. Obviously, he's got to clear everything. I think he's just approaching it like a normal week. So that's nice to see. Like Watson said, you obviously have to clear everything to see if you can play on Saturday. The Packers did play last Saturday, so Love does get that full week, but doesn't get that extra day if they could have played on a Sunday this time around. But taking it like a normal practice is nice to see that, he doesn't have to be too cautious because that could mean that the concussion's more serious. But again, with this quote from Watson and with the reality of the concussion, you can't really tell until Love, who will probably be a game time decision, can't really tell right up until it is game time. So lots to monitor there, but let's get into Wednesday's injury report and a big reason on why Jordan Love possibly being able to go on Saturday if he continues to progress throughout the week is good news because we turn it over and Malik Willis has obtained an illness. This Packers illness bug, whatever you want to call it, it is going around and now it has hit Malik Willis. So he did not practice on Wednesday. We're going to go through the rest of the guys that changed from their status on Tuesday to their status on Wednesday. Malik Willis being limited on Tuesday and now not practicing. Already dealing with that right shoulder injury, which is why he was limited Tuesday. Now you add on the illness and he did not practice at all on Wednesday. You go to Quinton Bohanna, who had an illness of his own on Tuesday, but he flipped spots with Willis. He now was limited in practice on Wednesday after not practicing on Tuesday. So nice to see him get over the illness bug, even though maybe it got passed to Willis. You go to Aaron Mosby. He was limited on Tuesday with that ankle injury, but a full participant on Wednesday. Nice to see because we really need that depth behind the defensive ends in Rashawn Gary and Kingsley Enagbare. And another guy that we need depth in the defensive end room, Lucas Van Ness, was limited on Tuesday with that foot injury, but he was a full participant on Wednesday. We go to the guys that did not practice 2 days ago on Tuesday, and that did not practice on Wednesday. You look at Bo Melton. He's dealing with an illness, has not practiced on Tuesday or Wednesday. Zach Tom with that back and knee injury, definitely a big loss for this Green Bay offensive line. He did not practice Tuesday and Wednesday. And then Christian Welch dealing with a concussion of his own, did not practice Tuesday or Wednesday. The rest of the injury report is the same as before, but again, this is an injury report with like 20 names on it, so it's not a light one to say the least. The Ravens, obviously on the other end, have a lot of guys on IR that aren't on that report anymore, but they have only about 5 guys, so the Packers are definitely going to need help from that depth if they want to come away with a win against Baltimore, but lots to monitor, and we'll definitely monitor it up until game day. But let's go into the defensive line, which I think is a key factor versus the Ravens, and definitely with these injuries, with Micah Parsons being out for the season, Devontae Wyatt being out for the season, these pieces in guys like Van Ness and Mosby, who now are full participants, are huge because Baltimore and their run game could be pretty dangerous. You got a running back in Derrick Henry, who, in my opinion, is one of the best running backs in the league. Not sure what Harbaugh's doing, not keeping him on the field as much as he should be. That's a problem for Baltimore, not a problem for Green Bay if that's what they're facing. And then you have Lamar Jackson. He's still questionable for this game with the back injury, but his backup in Tyler Huntley has some wheels, so he's a running threat. We saw him face Green Bay a couple years back in that game where Rodgers, I believe, tied Favre's record for passing touchdowns. And you look at that, and Tyler Huntley played a very good game. The Packers only won that game by 1 point. Obviously, that's a couple years ago. Things have changed, but Huntley has been around in the NFL for a while and even a Pro Bowl quarterback. Some guys had to drop out of it for him to get in there, but you still got to give him credit where credit is due. So looking into this just a little bit, looking at Baltimore, first of all, looking at their offensive line. Their offensive line has allowed 41 sacks this season, despite having those mobile quarterbacks, which is the 11th most in the NFL. So, they're not really in danger territory, but 11th still pretty high on that list to allow 41 sacks through 15 games this season. You look at the games with Tyler Huntley in there. One of them was an official start. One of them he split with Cooper Rush. And one of them he came in, this last game against the Patriots, he came in when Lamar Jackson went out. In those 3 games, there were 7 total sacks given up by the offensive line. So, you kind of got to nitpick those numbers. He played kind of half of a game in 2 of those and a full game in 1, but 7 sacks in that nonetheless. So definitely something to notice. Both quarterbacks act like running backs, kind of a tongue twister there. Both quarterbacks are very mobile, but it looks like Huntley, maybe not as great of a runner as Lamar Jackson, but Lamar Jackson is an MVP. It's pretty hard to play up to that level. You look at the Packers on the other end, though, of this defensive line, and they've struggled recently. They've gotten just 1 sack over their last 3 games, and they haven't gotten one over their last 2 during this 2-game losing streak to the Denver Broncos and to the Chicago Bears. So this Packers defensive line has not been able to get the pressure. That Bears game where they got that 1 sack over the last 3, it was Kingsley Enagbare. They were able to get some pressure with 6 quarterback hits on Caleb Williams, but still just 1 sack to show over the last 3 games. And Caleb Williams is a very mobile quarterback, don't get me wrong. Bo Nix, not as much, but again, in my opinion, a Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley, they're right in there in that Caleb Williams room. So it's not like it's going to get any easier than what they faced over the past couple of weeks. You look at their records in their games when the Packers have gotten 2 or less sacks, they sit at 3-5-1. And in games where they've gotten 1 or less sacks, they sit at just 2-5. So the defensive line, very important for, facing Derrick Henry on the ground, but I think they're more important for getting to the quarterback and sacking him for a loss of yards. Again, 2-5 in games where the Packers get 1 or less sacks. That's not pretty. It definitely makes sense. If you're not getting to the quarterback, you're probably struggling. You're probably not going to win the game, but still not a pretty record to see nonetheless. So the Packers defensive line is going to be huge in this one. Got to monitor the health over the next couple of days, but that is definitely a big X factor in my opinion. But we're in the Christmas spirit. We're in the holiday spirit. Let's end off the segment on who the Packers need to kind of be Rudolph. Who needs, maybe their nose isn't actually shining bright, but maybe they need them to lead the way. And my pick for this is Josh Jacobs on who needs to lead the way on Saturday night. Jacobs, rather quiet, arguably his worst game of the year. I would say his worst game of the year was against the Browns in week 3, but arguably one of his worst games of the year against Chicago. He is still battling that knee injury and an ankle injury, so you got to take it a little light on him, but he had just 12 carries for 36 yards in that game, did not find the end zone, and he fumbled, which was a big momentum shifter for Chicago. So Josh Jacobs needs to be the guy in this game. If Green Bay wants to come away with a win, obviously everyone is important, but I'd turn this to Jacobs. His 36 rushing yards in that game were his least amount of rushing yards in a game this season. That one against Cleveland, as I mentioned, he had just 30. You look at the Ravens defense, what Jacobs is going to be facing, and this Ravens secondary is not as great. The defensive line is where their strength is, and Josh Jacobs has to figure out how to make them struggle. The Ravens allow 108.9 rushing yards per game, which is 13th in the NFL. So, it's not dominant, but it's not bad. Kind of right in the middle, a little bit above that. So a solid defensive line nonetheless. But you look at Baltimore, they've allowed just 1 rush over 40 yards this season. I know that's a pretty long run, but when they allow, big runs, they're not massive runs, just 1 run rush over 40 yards this season. And Josh Jacobs, he really isn't a guy with many yards per carry. He's a great runner. He gets into the end zone a lot. But he really does not average many yards per carry, especially last game with those 12 carries for 36 yards. Not a pretty number, just 3 yards per carry in that one. So in my opinion, Jacobs definitely needs to attack the ground, needs to kind of open up that defensive line. But with how weak the Ravens secondary has been, and don't get me wrong, they're very injured. It's not a bad secondary overall. The injuries don't help at all. I think Josh Jacobs has to get involved in the passing game. And this will definitely change if Jordan Love's in the game or if Malik Willis is in the game. Malik Willis is in the game. You need to pass against the Ravens nonetheless. But I feel like if Malik Willis is in the game, maybe Jacobs is going out for more passes because Willis needs to have targets all around him. Jordan Love, maybe he's going to let it fly a little more. Jacobs, maybe not as much of a need in the passing unit, but I think nonetheless he needs to be running some routes. He needs to spread open the field, especially if they can't get the run game going. But Jacobs, again, he was limited in practice both Tuesday and Wednesday with that knee and ankle injury, so you got to monitor stuff there as well. Emmanuel Wilson, his backup, was dealing with an illness of his own. He is good from that. He was dealing with that heavier when they played the Denver Broncos, but still got to attack that Ravens defense, especially if you can attack the defensive line. It should be a pretty good offensive game for Green Bay. But that's all I got for this episode of Packers Latest. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. It's the holiday season. Go have a great Christmas, a great rest of the year. I'll be back for another video before game day. Don't you worry, but definitely not wearing this hat. This is a one-time thing, but you got to love the Christmas spirit nonetheless. But I appreciate you guys tuning in as always, hoping for some more positive news on that injury bug, and go Pack Go.